Imagine a world where reading a poem could cost your life, wearing glasses marked you as an enemy, where silence itself became a form of survival. Between 1975 and 1979, that world existed in Cambodia under a man named Pol Pot. What began as a dream of equality curdled into one of the most terrifying social experiments in modern history. As the Khmer Rouge took Phnom Penh in April 1975, the city did not welcome them with gunfire, but with relieved exhaustion. The country had been bled white by decades of civil war. Citizens believed the peace had finally arrived. In a matter of hours, however, soldiers started to drive out the citizens. Millions trudged on foot into the countryside with bags they could carry. Hospitals were looted. Babies died along the way. The capital city became a ghost city overnight. Pol Pot, Saloth Sar, who studied on scholarship in Paris, returned to his native land in the 1950s with Marxist ideals and contempt for colonial hierarchies. He absorbed radical theories of class struggle and complete revolution in France. But while others argued, he envisioned something absolute, an equal world free from corruption and Western encroachment. He would come to refer to it as Year Zero. The hand of history could be turned back, he believed. Monetary means were done away with in the rechristened Democratic Kampuchea. Schools shut down. Religion was outlawed. Cities were depopulated. The population was put into work brigades and instructed to live and till as a unit. Intellectuals, educators, monks, and anyone who was suspected of possessing connections to the old world were rounded up. They were killed in thousands. Others perished of starvation in the rice paddies. Families were dismembered, children broken up into distinct labor units and instructed to reject dissident parents. Pol Pot envisioned himself as the patriarch of a new civilization. He dreamed of the rice harvest doubled, tripled, but had no seeds, tools, or relief. When crops failed, he blamed enemies within. Paranoia intensified. Cadres were purged, soldiers were executed, and trusted colleagues were accused of being spies. The movement that promised to free Cambodia started consuming itself. At Tuol Sleng prison, formerly S21, thousands were photographed and questioned prior to being tortured and killed. Every confession was extracted from them through torture, every life extinguished by fear. Guards were often 15-year-old boys and younger, instructed to see brutality as an ethical duty. Some noted in their notebooks that they were creating a purer world. There is the irony. The revolution that was supposed to produce equality devolved into a hierarchy of terror. His most devoted followers fell victim to Pol Pot. His second-in-command lieutenants, Sun Sen, Hu Nim, and Vorn Vet, were betrayed, arrested at S21, and executed. Even his wife was suspected. Pol Pot, who had bragged about eliminating class distinctions, secretly reinstated them. There was a diminutive elite who ate and received medicine, and there were the millions who starved. He talked of self-reliance, but depended on Chinese assistance. The same person who disdained education maintained meticulous French notebooks detailing rice harvests. His heaven was constructed not on reason, but on obsession, a vision so purity-ridden that it devoured all that was human. By 1977, Cambodia's fields were great graveyards. Bony workers hunched over dry paddies, mumbling prayers they dared not utter out loud. Children vanished at dusk. Neighbors vanished after morning roll call. Citizens learned to grin when they wished to weep, because even sorrow could be misinterpreted as disloyalty. And still Pol Pot spoke, saying, "We are creating a paradise." How did it happen? Ideology, certainly, but also terror. The Khmer Rouge regime wasn't held in place by guns. It was held on suspicion. There were informers everywhere in the villages, villagers informed on villagers. Ordinary citizens did horrible things to demonstrate loyalty, some out of idealism, others out of survival. Pol Pot's Cambodia was not merely a dictatorship, but a labyrinth of the mind where reality itself was redefined on a daily basis. When famine struck, propaganda announced record harvests. When killings increased, officials boasted of enemies being re-educated. Words were manipulated so that truth no longer had meaning. It is a simple thing to conjure up Pol Pot as a monster beyond reason, but the most chilling reality is that he was not insane. He was methodical, regulated, and even reserved. A former schoolteacher who applied words the way a surgeon applies a knife. He never screamed. He merely determined who would live and who would perish. By the late 1970s, the revolution was devouring itself faster than it was killing. In fear of invasion by neighboring Vietnam, Pol Pot sanctioned attacks across the border. In December 1978, Vietnam retaliated, moving into Phnom Penh within weeks. The Khmer Rouge fled to the jungle. The horror, for most Cambodians, was over, but the trauma had been etched into the ground. In the devastation, the world learned of testimony to the unimaginable. Over 20,000 mass graves and approximately 1.7 million dead, a quarter of the country's population. Assassination, starvation, overworking, and disease had reduced a thriving culture to a field of bones. Pol Pot himself evaded justice. He spent almost 20 years in exile along the Thai border, protected by his hardline remnant army and Cold War geopolitics. Western powers, apprehensive about Vietnamese expansion, condoned the Khmer Rouge's survival. The man who had presided over one of the century's most heinous genocides lived a life of ease in exile, listening to radio reports of a world that had moved on from him. In 1997, following an internal coup in his dwindling movement, he was put under house arrest by his own comrades. The following year, prior to standing trial, Pol Pot passed away in his sleep, allegedly from a heart attack. No courtroom, no apology, no ultimate reckoning. The horror of Pol Pot's Cambodia reminds us that the worst atrocities start not with brutality. They start with a concept, a simple, seductive, allegedly noble one. A leader offers rebirth, oneness, and equality. But when such a vision requires obedience in lieu of humanity, terror is its driver. Now visitors to Phnom Penh can stand in the cells of Tuol Sleng, walls still inscribed with numbers and names. Outside the city, the killing fields are strewn with shards of bone after every storm. They are not artifacts of history from many years ago. They are mirrors of what occurs when ideology suspends empathy.